I have been in serious anticipation to bring this episode to you. We had a few false starts, but as always, I trust, and it just meant that the pleasure was prolonged. No more. Today, I have with me Jessica Maguire. She's an expert in nervous system repair. She's a TEDx speaker, author of The Nervous System Reset, and the voice of popular account repairing the nervous system. We are going to geek out for just 1 second. She also holds a Bachelor of Health Science degree and a Master of Physiotherapy. In her postgraduate study that includes the fields of neuroscience, neuroplasticity, brain-heart biofeedback, brain-body medicine, and, my favorite word, transcutaneous vagus nerve stimulation. This is like an ASMR episode. And transcutaneous vagus nerve stimulation. She also teaches and has taught, you are going to be astounded by the number when I tell you later on, thousands of students a long-term sustainable transformative methodology of nervous system repair, empowering them to step in the driver's seat of their own health and well-being. I have goosebumps. Jessica, welcome to White Hot Business.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. That was such a beautiful introduction.
I had a little help. Because I have had the absolute pleasure of reading and rereading your book in preparation for today. I'm just going to hold it up for everyone on YouTube. This is The Nervous System Reset. This is, and I must tell you, listeners will already know this, goosebumps are one of my signs that I'm very in tune. I'm getting a lot of messages and downloads. I need to tell everyone to get this book. It is absolutely exquisite. And I don't say that. I'm very, very particular. I'll put it in that way. Very, very particular about what I read and what I endorse. And this is absolutely exquisite. And I just loved it. It's like a warm hug. It is like talking with your best friend. It is like having the best coach that you could ever have. It's all those things and more folded into one. So please get the book. We will get to the book in a second because there's a thing or two from that I'd really like to expand upon with you. The first thing I wanted to ask you, though, is you've taught, get ready for it, 20,000, more than 20,000, maybe more now, definitely more now since you've done a few more releases of your incredible programs. And I'm wondering if we can start by speaking into the patterns of people with a nervous system who also have a business, especially women in business. Because what I've found is that it requires us, it has a certain set of demands, parameters, and it requires us to be so fucking nimble, right? Like so nimble with how we problem solve. And I think that's really unique to us if we want to stay in the game. And I was wondering if you had right now a woman in business, a woman in leadership in front of you right now, what are you most likely to be seeing in her nervous system?
It's a brilliant question. I think there's, first of all, a part of where we can look at the messages that women might be receiving about what it is to be a good leader. I think that's a really good place to start.
Oh, yeah.
Because, leadership, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm strong? Does it mean that I'm compassionate? Does it mean that I can listen, I can empathize, I can create a safe place? Do I have a team that believes that I can steer the ship? Do they really believe that? And I think that we've got to look at what we want or who we want to be as leaders. And this is something that a place I've stretched in for a long time. I'm a health practitioner who went into leadership, but still find it funny when people call me a founder because I'm like, I'm not a founder. I'm a health professional, so it still makes me giggle. But I've had to learn the leadership. And I think I've thought about this for a long time. What does it actually mean to be a good leader? And so part of what I look at with a team is being a role model and walking the talk. That's like incredibly important to me, because I think as soon as people start to see the, the cracks, it's not that they necessarily will have that trust that you can steer the ship if you're not walking the talk. And this isn't perfectionism. I'm talking about,
Understand.
sometimes that's being vulnerable with them and telling them the truth.
Yeah.
So part of that is there's got to be a sense where we can tap into vulnerability and connect with our team or with the people that we coach as well, or as a business. And I think we see a lot of brands doing this now, where there is this more open communication. There is a storytelling aspect. There is
Yes.
vulnerability there. I think that's what we really crave, is to have that connection.
Yeah.
And so I think for women in business, it's important to be able to connect with people, but to do that honestly and to do that thoughtfully as well, not just sharing with our team, oh, this is all the things I'm having trouble with, but really choosing wisely what to share, with honesty. But then, there is this aspect of the vision. There is this aspect of the why. And I've recently advertised for a position in our business, and the number of applicants was way beyond what I expected, and nearly every single one of them was, I want to work for a purpose-led business.
Wow. Yeah.
I love your vision. I love where you're going. I love what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's where people want to work for, work
Yes.
for you. So I think I don't deliberately try to put that forward, but again, that is, for me, vision is very strong and clear and easy to see where we're going, why we're doing it, and connecting people to that. So I think for a leader, the ability to hold steady and clear is really important. But probably what happens a lot, and I say this from personal experience and seeing others, is there tends to be a lot of noise around of what we should do. And particularly as businesses grow, it seems to be that more people want to come in and have an influence on that. So
Chime in. Yep.
yeah, so I think there's a part of this that is very nervous system related that comes back to, okay, you've got your compass as your goosebumps. I get a warm feeling in my belly. Yeah. So there's an inner knowing and an inner voice for us to connect with. What I think can happen is that for women in business who are not able to come to a place where there is, how do I listen to me? How do I have this vision? How do I stay true to that? It's easy then to get swayed, and a business will follow that. Now, that's happened to me. It's happened to me several times, particularly after I had my daughter. I found I was, really focused on her as well. But after having her, I was like, the business is different. I don't want to come back and do the same thing in the same way. There was a longing for more depth and connection with people, which meant adjusting the vision. Yeah. But within that, it created a lot of disruption, because a lot of people were like, well, we don't want this to change. And I was like, it's time for us to evolve. We've done really well. And I think it was seeing this, for me, it was really around, I used to be able to connect so deeply with people through platforms like Instagram. And I just found that when I came back after being a mum, I was like, this isn't enough anymore. It's not enough for me, and it's not enough for our students. We need to find deeper ways to connect with people, which has taken us 2 years. But next week, we're about to launch something new that allows us to have that connection. And we've restructured the business now. We bought out our training for health professionals and coaches specifically. And then there was, off the base of that, we are structuring it more now to connect with people deeper after they graduate on from that as well. So that came from trusting a voice inside of me that was like, this doesn't fit anymore. I've changed.
Yeah.
It needs to change. And even though a lot of people will say, I don't think you should do that. That's not the right way. You need to do it like this. It's particularly if we work as, it is us, it's us who's connecting.
Yeah.
We've really got to trust that, because the energy that comes from us to other people, even if it's through an online platform, our students or our customers or our clients feel that. So
Exactly. Most definitely. Yeah.
it was a real challenge, but I would say for women in business that I talk to, there's a similar experience of being able to trust. And I think we hear a lot from a nervous system point of view around, you've got to calm down, we've got to be regulated. And that's not, for me, how I view regulation at all.
No, that's one of the reasons. Well, there were so many reasons, but one of the key reasons why I did want to bring you on is because we see it very similarly. And I'm very fortunate to have had I did a certificate of sexological bodywork back when I was pregnant. I was the only pregnant person they'd ever had at the time, back in 2014. And so much of it was about the full, again, goosebumps, the full spectrum of experience and the ability to have choice. And the teachers who are still teaching it in Australia, they were bringing polyvagal theory in 2014, which was, quite cutting edge. I'm very fortunate for doing such a progressive program. And when I read your work and absorb your work, I'm like, we are so on the same page. And I just want to shout it from the rooftops that we want the full breadth of experience, and it's not just about calming down. And the word regulated is being so weaponized, and
Yes.
inside, and we're going to move on from that. But I just had to share with you is we're very much on the same page about that.
I was really glad to read that there are other people that still hold that. I feel for women because, if we look at the makeup of the male versus the female nervous system, the male typically has more sympathetic activation. He's already more mobilized. There's more, anger is more of a natural state if it's needed to be. And there's studies that show that men are viewed as decisive and a strong leader if they do get angry, as where for women, they're viewed as not being in control. Like there's good, robust research to show that. But for women, this calming down message, for women who already tend to drop into shame, internalization, suppression, we're just perpetuating that. And this is in business, where is what we're saying. A lot of women can get mobilized, but it's in how they read those signals of mobilization and connect it to the action to take.
Yes. 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 And their mobilization is so welcome, and it can be, how should I put it? I think there's a lot of demonization against the sympathetic. And there's this absence, in my opinion. I very much stand for beautiful sympathetic activation. That's why I do a lot of dance, and I have a lot of music, and it's like I see life as like this moving art form, and I see our bodies as this moving art form. And I always want women to know that their drive, their activation is so welcome. And when it's channeled in really beautiful, aligned, powerful ways, is so necessary and welcome in this world. And that it's not all about even your anger. It gets out, and you talk about anger every now and again on your feed. And I'm always doing the double tap. Sometimes I double tap so many times and tap after tap again. It's all welcome, because it can be alchemized into something that benefits other people and creates improvement in business in this lifetime. And I really see that in your work. And I think women have been given a terrible story about requiring to calm down and calm your farm and be subdued, be subservient, as one of my clients put it. It's very much like bring yourself down. And women are walking around completely in dorsal vagal, wondering why they feel numb, wondering why they don't feel desire and feel a pulse and a flame. And the messaging has been, bring it down, bring it down. So I'm wondering if you can speak into some of the ways that we can in a really beautiful way, bring it up as you put it in your book, that cold state of dorsal vagal.
I think it starts with knowing the states in such an embodied way to recognize in the moment, hang on a minute, I'm absorbing this. Particularly, we might see a situation play out and we're like, there's tension. And then it's almost like we've got to let the tension sit where it needs to sit instead of absorbing it as, oh, well, I must be doing this wrong.
Yes.
So there's got to be a time where we allow things to be uncomfortable, and that's okay, and allow other people to be uncomfortable. So this has been really hard for me. Like, come from a health practitioner background.
Very hard health practitioners.
Biggest fixers in the world. And so, we see a problem, we want to jump in. We see tension, we want to relieve it. So, compassion is a beautiful thing. Caring is a beautiful thing. Being generous is a beautiful thing. But I think we need to also look at, am I doing something to connect with somebody, or am I doing this out of fear? If I am not so nice, there's this fear of abandonment, rejection, being left. And I think that's so strong in the female nervous system because we are, biologically programmed for connection, for attachment in such a powerful way. And especially we look at stepping into motherhood and the oxytocin. But what that also means is that there's a time when we allow the mobilization to come in and, we start to feel, okay, I'm getting over this. I'm getting sick of this. And this was something that happened to me recently. And in the end, I was like, just let it rip. Let it go. Let it come.
Yeah.
I've been fighting it. I was like, hey, I need to calm down to make a good decision. I need to just hold this before I act. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, just let it go. So I let it come through. I walked, I moved, I used my voice, like a lot of really primal noises, like and let it come through. Yeah. And it was a truth that I'd been trying to ignore because I wanted to keep the connection there. And it made me have a really important conversation that needed to happen that changed a dynamic. And it's resulted in a good thing. But because I had this fear of when I let this come in and I really feel it and I really see the truth, it's almost like I can't go back. Because the signal's too strong. Yeah. I can feel this in my belly speaking to it, like such a part where you kind of deny that to yourself it's not always to keep the peace. It's probably to not hurt somebody else, but we know that it's going to bring a change, you know, like that can be in business with a team, or it can be in a friendship, it can be in a family dynamic. Yeah. And I think for us, for women, if we have that, I need to just push this down for a bit longer. It'll work out. We're okay. And then it's like, no, we're not. And it ties in with the fawn state, which your listeners are probably familiar with it, but you'll feel it as that blend of flight energy, the restlessness, it can be the butterflies in the tummy, the uneasiness where we know something's not right. But there's still an energy of dissociation that comes from that's cutting us off from our own inner awareness or our body awareness. And so seeing that, I think that's a hard state to recognize sometimes. It gets probably palmed off as anxiety for a little while. I just feel anxious. You're right. I just need to do that. Yeah. So I think that's the state where, we might find ourselves trying to, I'm going to say, maintain connection. I mean, this could be in business for somebody with the client who keeps...
It really comes up. Yeah. It really comes up in client, especially when you are doing work with quite sensitive topics, anything to do with health, anything to do with the body, anything to do with energy. These tricky situations and dynamics they will inevitably come up. And I think it's really powerful that you're speaking to this in this moment, because I have witnessed a tendency to like, let's just hope it all works out, or they'll understand without me actively communicating it. There's a sense of avoidance is too strong a word, but just this hope, like this hope that
Yes.
there's this hope that it'll all work out, it'll all just kind of course correct without the hard conversation or saying the thing or communicating the thing. So I think it's really important that you bring this up.
And the hope is definitely one, but I also think there's a little bit of this part sometimes where we're not completely honest and we say, it's not that bad, is it? You know, like they might be doing a few things really well. So we'll just,
Yep. Yes, selective. Like we can be really selective. It's like, but there's all of this. So I'll forgive or I'll disregard this because these other things, I can expand that. And it's okay, they're human and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, there's a tax, there's a penalty that we're paying in our bodies, in our hearts, in our truth, if we're, and you used a word before that I just want to say that I think we all need to be so cautious around, is holding. Like, what are we choosing to hold? And are we using holding as a way of maintaining something that's quite uncomfortable? Like, it sounds very noble, but it's also like, if you're just in holding all the time, then that's going to become incredibly taxing to you. If you're in that state of, I would say it's quite sympathetic, right? That like that state of like gritting your teeth, holding, it's okay, they're human, da 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 da, I won't bring it up. There's a cost to you. And to weave in the next topic, there's a cost to your libido as well when you're willing to just constantly hold. And this is a lot of the work I'm doing right now with women in business with their partners, holding their partner so hard and feeling responsible for their nervous system and their responses that it's just stifling the desire. So I wanted to ask you, do your course participants bring up the topic of sex? I know privacy might be an issue, but does that come up in your work, just how this all translates to what happens in the bedroom?
Yeah, so it was interesting. The last round of students we had graduate from the nervous system program, vagus nerve program, that's an 8-week course. They said how much relationship dynamics changed. That was the most, like, that is so insightful. And it makes sense, like from a neurobiology point of view, the networks for regulation are the same as the networks for attachment. So if we are having nervous system things like where we are anxious, fight or flight, that sympathetic, can't switch off, can't relax, we're probably going to see in our relationships that there's criticism, reactivity. We might start arguments. We might blame. There's that fire, and it's probably externalized.
Yep.
And then if there is more of the shutdown, dorsal vagal immobilization, there can be the stonewalling, withdrawing, isolating, and not getting back to people, that kind of thing, which I think that's more internalizing, so there's like a retreat within or there's a blame without. And both of those are going to impact our desire greatly. But I think the conversations, probably a lot of them were around learning to, first of all, just express things from understanding now, oh, that's why I'm having this reaction to this. So there could be a little bit of that. Okay, I recognize now this is something from my own past that was getting pushed on as well. And perhaps my partner was playing a role in it too. So there was a different way of seeing it and then being able to actually find a common ground to communicate, which led to more intimacy, more connection, like a new dynamic in that relationship. And for many women, that's the only way that we are going to have an attraction to our partner, is because we're not so angry and blaming, but we're also not having this sense of shame or shutdown or disconnect from the body. So yes, it absolutely ties back to sex, albeit there's probably not as much openness in sharing it as about other
Yeah, of
parts of
course.
it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it absolutely ties back in the relational dynamics for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. And I appreciate that while I asked about sex, you brought it back to relating, which is obviously really powerful because that's our foreplay. That really is the foreplay, how we're relating and the dynamic that we have with our partner. And what I'm hearing is when there's less of that undesirable sympathetic activation, less of that undesirable parasympathetic activation, we get to hit that sweet spot of the ventral vagal where we feel seen, where we feel heard, and it feels like a dissolving of some of the tension that doesn't work to not good tension, like not good sexual tension, but the tension that really feels like a barrier to opening our bodies to intimacy because it is one of the most vulnerable states our body can be in. Because on a very biological level, we're less aware of our external environment and we're in our inner world when we're in a good quality sexual interaction, we're actually at our most vulnerable.
Mm.
And so in terms of being a human, being a woman, especially, and enjoying sex, just to speak to listeners, if you haven't quite put this all together, one of the reasons why it can be so hard to quote unquote let go is because you need to be in the most vulnerable state in terms of on a base level, your survival in order to let go and release. And if there's anything that you want to add to that or any practical notes, I'd definitely be open to hearing them.
Sure. So I think if we look at it as a state point of view of what we're doing when we are intimate with somebody, there has to be the ability to be still. And there is a blended state called
Mm.
stillness,
Mm.
which it's a blend of our dorsal vagal state, which we might say is, freeze or collapse. But when we blend it with safety, connection, and the social engagement system, so when we're paired with somebody and there is that back and forth with eye gaze, with sound,
Yeah, sound.
sound.
Yep.
We are coming in, technically we are immobilizing, although there is movement with sex, but it is being able to be still with this deep sense of safety, but also the connection, the back and forth with, movement and often sometimes facial expression, sometimes sound. So that blended state can be really hard for some people to move into. Like you said, it can feel vulnerable. So for people who are dysregulated, and may feel that like stillness isn't necessarily safe. So that's like where their survival brain can say, no, 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 you can't be still. This isn't safe. Like hypervigilance, that kind of thing. So definitely linked in that way in some of the cases. I know we can't say that's for
Yeah.
every time people have sex, but that's a huge part. And then, of course, being able to connect to the body in the sense of interoception, which is our eighth sensory system and how we feel and understand our bodily signals and the inner world. So that is very much carried out via the vagus nerve and other senses, but it's useful for us to look at, well, if somebody tends to dissociate or cut off from the body because sensations are too strong, that of course is going to have an impact on how they experience pleasure, how they feel. So we can so see that overlap with the nervous system and sex and what we're experiencing with that as well. And it was really interesting because a lot of the signals that are sent that we probably are receiving as well are carried via the spinal cord to the brain for us to orgasm. But there was a study that showed that spinal cord patients who had severed their spinal cord were still orgasming, and it was via the vagus nerve. So amazing that the vagus is playing that role in pleasure and speaks so much to what's happening in our head because of, if we're all up in our head and we're all busy It's going to be so hard to get down into the body. And the nervous system's language is sensations. So,
Yes.
it's like if we can't connect to that, it's harder for us not only to manage anxiety and stress, but also to feel pleasure too.
Yes, yes, completely. Oh, completely. I'm just absolutely buzzing at the moment. You mentioned sound before, and I'm a big endorser of sound. I always have been. And again, that goes back to my training in sexological bodywork, which was breath, movement, touch, sound, breath. We just said those 4 words over and over again over the time of the program. And I really feel like sound is such a neglected piece in the conversation because
Yeah.
it's very activating for people. That raw, I love that you mentioned it before, that raw primal sound that you made in order to come to your truth with that decision that you needed to make. I absolutely love that because for me, sound just fast tracks it all. If I make sound, I get to drop in, and I'm a big fan of speed. I'm a very fast moving human being. I love efficient speed. My question is like, how can I get to this state? How can I like really start to feel this thing that I want to feel? And I've found sound to be one of the most efficient portals to do that because sound relates to pleasure a lot. And that's been very taboo for women to even just go, When I was a sex therapist, I would say to clients, what would it be like to just go, when you eat something nice? Like starting very, very small. What's it like to just make a on the exhalation? And
Yeah.
it's just very, very small. So many of them, because they were experiencing sexual shutdown, vaginismus, making sound was very confronting, very, very confronting, just to get things moving again. So back to pleasure. Pleasure and sound. Yeah, do you have anything else to say on that?
Yeah, look, I love the thing of the voice,
Yeah,
using the
me
voice
too.
in the nervous system.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, when we think about the voice, we often think it's so cerebral, right? Like I've got top-down control.
Yeah.
But the control over the voice is part of the social engagement system and the vagus nerve running from the heart to our face. So, we might say we wear our heart on our sleeve, but we wear our heart on our face and through our voice. Now, so doing a lot of my background was also in Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So, blended it in with patient treatments. I could hear in someone's voice through a lot of training, and I can still hear it now when they've got trouble with regulation via listening to the voice.
Yeah.
So there'll be like a boom to it and they can't sort of control that. And you sort of go, whoa, that's interesting. So the voice to me has always been like hearing that just as much as anything else to see what state somebody might be in. And so people might be familiar that, with somebody who's anxious, there is that sound and that breath and that is going to be incredibly hard to connect to the body. And then someone who's feeling collapsed is going to have the monotone restricted.
Yeah.
But from that social engagement system where we hear the prosody and you start to hear people use their voice in quite it's a body-based way. Like I see my daughter and I can't help but speak to her in that sing-songy voice. And I think this is that it's like when we tune into the sensory and then we allow the voice to come rather than having the cerebral, how do I make this sound perfect?
Yeah.
They're slightly different things, right?
Completely different.
It's not like saying, yeah. And it's interesting, even we were talking about this in one of our courses this week around setting boundaries. Now, so often I see these people are handing out, like giving scripts on how to say the perfect word to set a boundary. And I'm like, well, what about just helping somebody who feels scared and weak to connect to their body, to feel that sense of strength, and then just let the voice come from that strength?
Yeah.
And I think this is the same with pleasure, right? Instead of trying to think about it as a cerebral thing, it's like, well, how would that pleasure vocalize? How would I let that come forward? So again, it's taking out the thinking and the judging and the analyzing to let it express as a sensation, like the sensation expresses a noise. And I love it with what you said as well. It's really when we hear that sound of pleasure, my goodness, that for some people will just increase, like from our partner, that will increase their own pleasure
Yeah.
much. And it is
feedback.
yes. So the sound for the other person, if we hear those mid-frequency sounds, it's connecting us to our social engagement system. So it really brings that intimacy. But for a lot of people, like you said, Lauren, it can feel so strange to start with in making a noise that's so freeing. But I think there is that connection to, definitely thinking freeing the voice, like letting the body have the freedom through the neck, through the mid spine to actually let go first and then let the sound flow. So yeah, very primal, but it's a great way as well for us to work in a bottom up way to change what's happening in the brain.
Yes. Yeah. I'm really grateful you made that distinction, because a lot of our connection to the voice is that top down. How do I censor it? Like you said, how do I get the right script? Like, what's the script? Tell me what to say. And it's very top down, very cerebral. And I just want to give everyone a heads up. This is where you're actually going to find your power and you're actually going to feel your pleasure, is from that approach, and really allowing the sound to come from the base all the way up throughout your body. A side kind of question, sort of to sound, it's more about movement, but I live in a neurodivergent family. It's very interesting. It definitely keeps me on my toes in terms of navigating the full spectrum. But I also I think there have been studies about neurodivergent people becoming entrepreneurs, because it is that I have a vision, it's very out of the box, I want to follow it, I feel compelled to do this thing, I can go into hyperfocus. With some of my clients, and I've actually noticed this in myself as well, sometimes if we want to come down, we actually have to go up first. I'll only say it from my perspective, it feels like I need to discharge in order to bring things out. If I'm here, if I feel stressed and you ask me to come down, I'm going to get a little bit irritable. And so a lot of my clients, they said, when you take me into my body, I'd rather it be up. When you try to take me down, I just don't respond well to that. I'm like, okay, let's be really nimble with it. What does your work have to say about the desire and the requirement to go up in order to come down in a really juicy way? Because this does connect to sex as well.
Yeah, for sure. If we take mobilization of our brain and body, and we take cortisol, and cortisol gets this terrible rap as being a stress hormone, but it's just mobilizing glucose for our brain. It's giving us energy. It's not a terrible thing.
No.
We release cortisol when we wake up. And so there's times through the day where we are going to be activated. I mean, it could be that I'm really excited from talking to you, get off this call and then try and sit down and get all zen. I'm like, no, I've got too much energy. I'm excited. It's not the time for sitting still.
Yeah.
And so then if you looked at it with what we spoke about with anger, and I think this is where so much nervous system work falls short, because if somebody has strong fight energy in their body, the desire is to contract. It's to activate those muscles. And so if I'm angry and I bring my hands up and I make some fists and I activate the muscles on my back and I use my voice with that, it actually feels good. It feels like I move it. But then there's actually people find a little bit of settling after that. And so it could be with flight energy where we feel really mobilized, a little bit scared. We could do it could just be a 5-minute walk first. And then our heart rate comes up. That mobilized energy actually gets chewed up like it's meant to.
Yes.
The glucose is there. But we're telling people who are activated, just be still. And they're like,
oh, It's
I
just,
don't want to be still.
it is like, oh, yeah, like I'm bristling and now like that is
Totally.
like the most, and I was just wanting to weave it back because you mentioned a really beautiful version of stillness, what you were speaking into 5 minutes ago or so when you were talking about sex. We're not talking about just be still,
Mm.
which can feel like stuckness if you're vibrating with that residual energy. It's like, sit here, what do I do with this?
Mm.
And I feel like that's actually the fastest way to get to that beautiful state of stillness is that discharging that you're speaking into.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look at kids, like they use movement to regulate all the time,
Yeah.
but yet they get to school and then there's this compliance to be still. And punishment might be, all right, well, we'll take away recess or lunch. And then they just get no opportunity for movement
Yeah.
to, that's their way of regulating. But I think also, we said stillness was that blend of the dorsal vagal immobilization and the ventral vagal. But we can also have play, which is the blend of the mobilization with the ventral vagal. So it feels safe to mobilize.
Yeah.
And this can be great for people who tend to move into anxiety really easily. But this is what we can bring in with sex. It can be playful. It can be like pleasure is mobilizing for so many people and it can feel
Yes.
safe. So for people who have that tendency of, oh, this feels too much, sensations feel too big, it's a great way to train our nervous system to hold more of that mobilization as well. Like
Yeah.
if anger feels too much, we can say, let's move into play
Yeah.
or passion in a different way that will transfer across to things like sex, to anxiety, to being able to, as a business person,
Yeah.
to it's not about being strong. I think it's about having that flexibility to say, times are tough right now. I need to have good leadership. And that is going to mean bringing in that sympathetic activation
Mm.
to stand true to what is. So it can be learning to do that without moving into fight energy and reacting at people, or flight energy and feeling anxious and scared.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such sound wisdom that you've shared there. And I was just kind of hearing the word bridge, like that play really, it really acts as a bridge to so many other different states. And in all honesty, play can be so, I'm not going to say triggering is too strong a word, but very activating for people who like to be in control.
Perfectionists will say,
Yeah.
am I doing it right?
Am I doing it right?
Which can cross over to sex, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
play is a way where we can have that freedom to explore through all the sensory experiences without saying, am I doing it right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. So, and it really, and again, that's very top down. Am I doing it? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it the methodical way? Am I ticking the box? And the opportunity there, and again, I'd love your take on this is like, well, would you be asking someone, what do they feel as they're doing it? What sort of sensation are they experiencing? Would your line of questioning be going down that path of sensation?
Yeah, for sure. So
Awareness.
it's like play is the foundation for things like interoception. So if we're getting people to connect to their sensory experience, I love starting with something that they have a mobilization with, but it feels pleasurable or good, or that they feel safe with doing it. So for some people, that can be time in nature. It can be going to a comedy show. It can be being with someone. But it does help if you are with somebody for that co-regulation, the back and forth. And, if in the case of intimacy, it might be feeling safe enough to be seen where you're doing something playful, even if that feels a bit awkward, but you're still going with that and allowing that to happen and tuning into the sensations in your body. But the back and forth where there's eye contact, reciprocity, there's smiling, there's talking for the sound, that's all going to help to build that flexibility there. And
I love that. Yes. I endorse that 100%. I really feel like sometimes that's just those sorts of states, and I've just got like visuals of Ed and I running through my mind. We're very lucky. We like a lot of witty repartee. We love double entendres. Like we can turn anything into a fucking double entendre. It's like you take anything and just flip it back around to make it. I can kind of see it all happening, and it really is such a beautiful state. Like that play is such a beautiful state to be in. It can be just as pleasurable as a great release climax sexual. It really is. Yeah, it really is so beautiful, and I just want more women to experience that and have the power of that. Something I love in your book is you said when it comes to plasticity, the fewer tools, the better. And I think this is also I would also apply this to sex as well. I would not be giving any clients a massive toolkit. I'd be saying, focus on really getting a good foundation with these things. And I just was wondering, for people who haven't read the book yet, what you mean by when it comes to plasticity, the fewer tools, the better. Because when you top down, you're like, give me all the things, give me all the information. My clients are very information. They don't need more information. They just need pure currents of implementation that work and to repeat and to get solid. So just can you speak to that, because it does apply to any sort of intimate problem that we have?
Yes. So love our ability to change, like in the brain and the body. And we talk about plasticity and that ability to change as though it's just neurons. But, the term bioplasticity, I like more than neuroplasticity, because so much more than just neurons change when we have different experiences. So from the clients that we work with, we see changes in their immune, their hormonal, their digestive systems all will change when they come to regulation more. So when we're looking to create a change in our body or a change in our brain, it's really giving information to the brain that's a new sensory experience. So the brain works via prediction, and it will say, okay, I recognize this, even if it's generalizing, it's not exactly the same. It'll say, I recognize this, I'm going to create this output. Because we're wired for efficiency. We're not wired for happiness, optimization, or accuracy. We're wired to be like, let's stay safe. So if we want to create change, like let's say someone is a perfectionist and finds play hard, and they're often in that flight energy and they can't bring themselves down, for them to have a new sensory experience of feeling play, feeling that mobilization, feeling that fun, feeling that freedom in their body where they're not bracing or rigid, that is what updates their neural networks, but also this internal model that we have that works on how we will then predict what's going to happen next. Now, from a physiotherapy point of view, this is like our bread and butter. We help stroke patients, people who've had injuries and have issues with understanding where their body is, but it applies to pain, it applies to anxiety, it applies to so many things, which is we need to create new, embodied, compelling experiences.
Compelling. Highlight.
Information's not going to cut it. You can read everything, but this is why we don't need 32 tools. When I was a new physio, I was so annoying. I would give my patients 22 exercises and they would do none.
We've all been there. I'm just like, Hank's head. Yes, I think, and I've worked with a lot of healthcare professionals that over-deliver and over-give and then go, why are they not moving? And I'm like, because it's actually too much. Like,
way too much. So starting with 3 things is plenty. The other thing is, if you're in the moment stressed, you're not accessing the part of your brain where you do your best thinking anyway. But trying to remember something and it's being really complicated just makes it hard. So this is where, if we're working with a couple of resources in a given week, that's fantastic. And we try and do it with per state, depending on the state that you're in to start with. And it's really in the heat of the moment when we use them that we see the big change. We can all be regulated in the morning when no one's up and we're on our yoga mat and we've just had a coffee and there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
It's when we're in the moment of conflict or when we're scared about really being intimate or when our business, there's a lot of pressure or when money is something that's triggering us. That's the time when we want to create that new experience.
Yeah, most definitely. So takeaway from that is practice 3 things max and establish a foundation with them to know how well they work, whether or not they work for you. Definitely strip it back. You just mentioned one of my favorite things, which is money. And one of the last questions I have for you is, do your course participants and clients notice a difference, a shift in their money, in their ability to receive money when they start doing more work on their nervous system and vagus nerve?
Yes. So, I mean, it's such a primal thing, isn't it? Like it's so linked to survival. We can't separate money from the nervous system. I mean, we could for some people, we can say, oh, they need to be more regulated, but actually they just need to not be living below the poverty line.
Yeah. I'm glad you made that distinction. Yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I think for looking at people who might be getting stuck in those same loops, it's so intricate. So we can say, does it come back to, am I charging enough? If we're saying that energy of, I don't deserve to be paid this much. I'm asking for too much by putting XYZ price on it. I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
And coming from a more regulated state, we can be much more objective and actually value ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's a massive one. And then, of course, for people who might be getting hooked in that mobilizing energy that drives them to really feel like, I can't take that risk. It's not safe. What if this happens? Yeah. But really, there's, it's like wearing a different pair of glasses, right? So in each state, money can look completely different because the stories that we have around things follow the state that we're in. So, in that collapse, it's going to be things are hopeless. They'll never get better. I'll never be able to get the money that I need or make this. And in the sympathetic, it's more around that being protective and, it can create a lot of fear around, well, what if this happens? I can't take that risk.
Yes. And there never being enough. When I get this, then I'll feel safe. And they get it. And it's like, but when I get this, then I'll actually feel safe. Then I'll feel secure. And there's this holding, to go back to the holding, there's this holding energy around money. So I was just curious about that, especially when we've got our own. And again, we're speaking more to people who have business. And when you have a business, you have a degree of choice over how you earn, what you earn, when you earn, even how you sell. And so it's more, I was just really curious. I have no doubt that if a business owner went through your program and really started to put on the glasses and look at that nervous system regulation and their relationship to money, I have no doubt that their situation would improve. No doubt.
It just makes, something to be more objective about it is really helpful. Not that we separate ourselves from it, but it's like when the story is there, I think it's just such a habit to think that safety is going to come from when there is this magic number in the bank, but that's not always the case. And to have that sense of trust and security beforehand allows us to be so creative. It's when we get our innovative thinking, we get into flow state. I mean, ideas come. It's just like, it's such a different place, but we close off that with being out of regulation.
Yeah, we do. Oh, Jessica, I am in a beautiful state right now. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want business owners to know about their nervous system, intimacy, and how they can experience more power and pleasure?
I think from everything we've spoken about, Lauren, which has been so fun, the thing we're looking for is the flexibility, and that is what allows us to match what's happening outside of us with the correct activation inside. So that's incredible. That's what peak performance comes from. But also, when we have the ability to understand our nervous system, we can see reality just as it is, which makes, I believe, is what makes us the best at business, because we're seeing reality rather than the story.
Yeah. And something you mentioned earlier on, which I put away to mention later, is, and it's almost like seeing that allows you to access more of your desire because you're not in that survival mode. Like, you do see things objectively, but you also get to sprinkle in that desire as well. And you were saying that is like the vision, when you were talking about the vision changing when you had your daughter, it was like, what I was hearing was, I'm not going to operate my business out of shoulds and what everyone else is saying I should do, because this is the trajectory that it should take. This is where I want to take the vision, and it's more important that I listen to that desire and the vision that I hold over what everyone else says that I should. So I'm just throwing in it, just seeing it as this multi-layered concept of getting out of survival, getting into that objectivity. And when you're in that, then you can bring the I want, I desire, without being really attached, without being needy, desperate, obsessional even.
And there's a part of this where we're allowed to create from the depths of what it is that we absolutely love.
Yeah.
It's not, and I think there is that part, it takes stripping back the layers of survival mode, being objective. And like you said, the desire of it is not a longing or a grasping. It's like, this is my fucking purpose.
Yes.
This is what I'm here to do. Which, you put any woman into that place, she's going to do amazing things.
Yeah, unstoppable. Completely unstoppable. Unapologetic, unstoppable, power unleashed. Jessica, thank you so much. Where can listeners access more of your work and what it is that you do?
Head on over to my website. So it's just my name, jessicamaguire.com. I'm probably the busiest on Instagram. It's where I like to hang out, but there's lots and lots and lots of resources on my website as well.
Yeah, they are. You run exceptional classes, exceptional programs. I've heard wonderful things because as a sexologist and former nurse, I'm connected with a lot of health professionals still, and I've just heard wonderful things about your program. So if you are at all curious, get onto it. Get yourself in. Thank you so much for being on White Hot Business.
Thanks, Lauren.